Hello and welcome to Great Deltan. Today I'm going to be giving you a quick tour of the finished baseboard, and then we'll go through some layout plans where I want everything to go on this new project. I'm now at a stage where I can begin track laying. The baseboard is fully complete. However, the construction of the baseboard has taken a considerable amount of my free time over the last couple of months, so I've fallen behind with my to-do list in and around the house to the car. A few little DIY jobs, so I'll be getting those done first. We're looking at track laying to commence within the next 2 or 3 weeks. So to begin with, let's just talk about the baseboard. Now, all the boards on the top are plywood, apart from a couple which were MDF. I'll explain why in a bit, because I was originally going to go with fully MDF. So the framework is built using these 40 by 60 joists from Homebase B&Q. They're readily available, they're fairly cheap, and they're quite nice to work with. They're also very strong, so it's good for making baseboard frames. So I've attached several uprights to the wall with some raw plugs, and then we've got the basic, attached to that is the basic baseboard frame of your horizontals and your cross beams. And then if I can show you down below, we've also got some legs made of the same material. These are all put together just using some wood screws. I've done my best to get it as level as possible with a spirit level, but it's never perfect, especially as the garage floor isn't quite even. So the next job I wanted to get done before all the boards were laid down was the electrics. All of the sockets and all the wiring is integrated into the framework, so it would be a lot easier to do without all the boards on, so I can work from it all above an open plan. I've got 6 sockets over there. Now that'll be the main control station. As you can see, I've already put my DR5000 in, and then I've also got spare sockets for air compressor, soldering iron, and then maybe a phone charger, my MCDU if I decide to do point motors, and a lighting power supply as well if I decide to add lights to the layout. There is also a socket on the back side of this frame, and that's for if I want to do anything on the car. I haven't got to run an extension lead under the layout and plug inside the layout. I can just use the socket on the outside, like the pressure washer or air compressor for tyres and whatnot. I've added several power points around the layout to avoid using extension leads. Obviously I'll be using soldering iron compressor around the layout for weathering and dropper wires and whatnot. So I've got plenty of power as and where I need it. The next thing I wanted to get done while all the boards were off was all the lighting. I managed to save I saved every single light from the shed layout, so I've only had to buy 2 new lights, and I got them from Homebase, which wasn't too bad. They're all LED and they're lovely and bright. They're all wired into 2 fuse spurs. I've got one there, and I've got one down here. I'll just show you the difference in lighting when I turn the lights off. It's almost pitch black in here, so good lighting is important to me. There's nothing worse than having to squint your eyes to try and make out details of layout, and it just looks awful. So good lighting is important to me. I may have gone over the top a bit, but at least every square inch of layout is pretty much lit, apart from this area over here, which will be the scenic break. So then it was time to lay the boards down. Originally I was going to go with MDF as it's a bit cheaper, it's more readily available. However, I suddenly remembered that it is an absolute pain to try and push track pins into MDF. The way the boards are manufactured, they're just ridiculously dense, and I bent so many track pins and lost my frustration a lot of times doing the old layout. So I bought about 4 MDF boards by the time I realised this, and I decided to make the switch to plywood, go to Dewson and get about 6 or 7 boards. They are about £27 each, so it's a bit more expensive. However, it should prevent any warping, as there's plenty of bracing underneath, and it's going to be a lot easier to work with. If I'm doing scenery, then it won't absorb as much moisture either, and it will just be a lot better. I did use the 2 MDF boards, I used 2 of the MDF boards that I had for this area over here, which will be the scenic break, so I don't have to put as many track pins in, and if it warps it won't be too bad. And then I've got a couple of boards spare for making tunnels, platforms, whatever, so the MDF I bought won't go to waste. All of the plywood is just attached to the baseboard, the framework, with wood screws, and all countersunk so they're nice and flush, so they shan't be seen at all. Now, what I've got in this garage is not a complete blank canvas. I did have a layout plan in mind, and I've accommodated some features I wanted, such as this drop down section here. As you can probably tell, this will be a bridge under the railway, and then there'll be a smaller incline here towards that surface. And then on this other side of the layout, you might notice in the opening scene, I've got this long raised section, which is probably going to be, which will be an embankment. I quite liked the embankment I had on the temporary layout, so I decided to include it on this layout as well. And then down here, you'll see that I've got this bridge, which I've sort of made, and there'll be a motorway under there. And then all of the rest will be an embankment. So, as we're getting onto that, I'll go for the layout plan soon. Just a couple more things to talk about. Number one is the back scenes. Now, the first time I did back scenes, I stuck them to some cardboard with some PVA glue, and it was a horrendous job. They bubbled like hell, they warped, and they were just an absolute disaster. The second time I did them, I stuck them to some MDF boards with some backscene paste, and they turned out a lot better. However, they still warped. So what I've done this time is I've added some bracing on the back of the back scenes to stop the warping, and then they're fixed at a lot more points as well. I've gone with the backscene paste again and the MDF boards, and that seems to have worked quite well. I've got 5 different back scenes, all by Gauge Master, as you can see. They tie in quite well for what I want from the layout. And there's a few little bubbles or ripples here and there, but it's nowhere near as bad as what I've had in the past. So the back scenes have turned out really well. This column and this column should be disguised by something or other, so I didn't bother to put the back scenes on them. And then the last thing I've done to the baseboard is the DCC bus wire. If I zoom in over there, you can see I've got my bus wire stemming from my DR5000. All I've used is some solid core cable from some twin and earth I got spare, and that runs the entire inner perimeter of the layout. It's everywhere I need it. I use solid core cable because, if you know me, I don't particularly like to use splices. I like to solder my dropper wires, and stripping cable in the middle, stripping off insulation in the middle of a cable, not at the end of it, is a lot easier to do with solid core, and it's also a lot easier to solder as well. So I've used that for the DCC bus. As said in the previous video, the framework is designed and built to accommodate all of my tools and possessions, so they fit as snug as possible. So I've got a position for the ladder, the mitre saw and the air compressor, they all fit under there nicely. Music gear, and then I got my music gear over here as well. And then all my tools fit onto these shelves, which I've sort of just made out of bits and bobs. There's no point spending the earth just trying to make out some shelves. So I've got some insulation board there, and I've got a board from the old layout down there as well. And then in here is all the stock. At the minute it's just sort of sitting loose in here. However, I'll get some foam trays which I can stack in here. They'll be a lot more protected and a lot more efficient, so I can space it all out. So that's the baseboard. So let's move on to some layout plans. Right, so the layout is going to be loosely based on a section of track of the West Coast Main Line from Northampton to Milton Keynes Central, which is local to me. I'll be replicating a few features from that section. It'll be a 4-track main line split into 2 pairs of fast tracks and slow tracks. The 2 fast lines will be on the outside of the layout, and they will just be entirely flexi track. There'll be no point work or anything. I'll be using no set track on this layout anyway. It'll all be flexi track and sort of streamlined points, as I like to have some smooth running, so no issues with derailing or uncoupling due to tight corners. And then the 2 slow lines will be where you'll find any of the point work that will be on this layout. And then the 2 fast lanes will be used more or less just for high-speed trains, which won't really stop, and they'll just be passing by. And then the 2 slow tracks will be for the freight and the regional services, so they'll go a bit slower, and there'll be a bit more movement in terms of point work. In terms of detail on the layout, I'm going to be going for somewhere halfway between the temporary layout I did and the original Mark 1 Great Deltan. This is because I'm going to be in this house for about 3 to 5 years, not sure when we're next going to move, but I don't want to go too much in and then have to dismantle it all, or without getting any proper use out of it, so I won't be going too heavily on the detail, but I'll still be doing enough to make a decent layout. You might be asking me, well, if you might be moving in a few years, then why have you built such a big layout? And that is because I don't know if I'm ever going to get this sort of space to use for this purpose again. I'm not sure what I'll be able to afford when I do buy a house, so it's nice to have this layout, well, it's nice to have this space to build a layout, so I'm going to make the most of it while I can. So let's start with the back there. That'll be a scenic break, where I'll be unloading trains. I shan't be building a fiddle yard as they're incredibly time consuming, they're costly, and if I wanted a fiddle yard to accommodate all of my stock, it'd probably be the size of this garage, as I do have a fair bit. I've been loading and unloading trains into the layout by hand for the last 3 years, so I'm quite happy just to carry on. So let's move round here. As the 4 tracks approach this corner, they will split into 2 pairs on the right hand turn, and then there'll be a road bridge from the front to the back of this section of baseboard, and the 2 pairs of tracks will emerge from under that road bridge. A little bit like Leicester Station, however obviously Leicester isn't on the section of track I'm trying to replicate, but it's just a feature I like. From there the tracks will travel in about half a foot or a foot of open track with nothing before they approach the main station, the new Deltan Central. Not sure what I'm going to call it yet. This station will be a 6 platform station with the 4 running through tracks having their own platforms, and then there'll be 2 bay platforms as well. The 2 bay platforms will face this direction and terminate over there, and they'll travel out this way. In front of the station will be a car park and a building which will connect to the road bridge, forming the start of the road network. As the tracks come around here, they will ever so slightly turn left. This station is based loosely on Wolverton. Wolverton Station is very much a basic but quite a good modelling station to do, because it's got 4 platforms and the tracks going through it are on a slight curve. They're super elevated, and they're just it's quite a good station for train spotting as well. So I'll be replicating Wolverton ever so slightly, just adding the bay platforms. So the tracks will exit the station on a left hand turn, and then they will S-bend round to the right as they go over this bridge, much like they do at Wolverton, to create a nice sort of view as the tracks meander their way around the curves. Down here will be a decline road, and that will go under there to form a road bridge, which is also a feature from Wolverton. So let's move over here. You can very lightly see that I've drawn an exact semicircle all the way around here, which leads on to that raised section. This is a equal semicircle, which I have done to the diameter roughly of the width of the garage, using a couple of pieces of wood and acting as a compass. So the tracks will follow this semicircle to form a large U-turn. Obviously that will be hidden halfway to deny the fact that it is a U-turn on the West Coast Main Line, which will never happen. As the 4 tracks come around here, they will split into 2 pairs, or they probably will just never go into 4 tracks altogether. They'll stay as their 2 separate pairs as they come out the station. And then as they come round to this right hand bend, there will be a tunnel or a bridge or something, and obviously that's why I need the separation there for the tunnel portals. Not sure what I'm going to put up there. There could just be a little bit of countryside, or if there's a bridge it would just be a dual carriageway or something. And then as the tracks emerge, they will continue round onto this elevated section, which will be an embankment. Obviously all the curves will be super elevated, and it's all flexure track, so I should get some lovely sort of shots with the camera and nice viewing angles there. As they come around here, they will again S-bend round to the other direction as they come into this long straight section of track here. Just here will be the M1, which is a feature of this section of track which I'm doing on the West Coast Main Line, where I'm replicating. The M1 actually doesn't go under the full 4 tracks, it goes under 2 sets of 2. One is the Northampton Loop Line, and one is the direct route from Rugby to Milton Keynes. However, just for this layout, I wanted to do all 4 of them over the M1, so that would be a nice feature. And then the tracks will follow this long straight section as they come around into this corner. To finish off, the tracks will once again separate into 2 pairs, and then they will take the right hand turn. However, this will all be surrounded by a countryside cutting, which will be based off road cutting. So that'll be 2 sets of retaining walls surrounding these 2 pairs of tracks, and then there'll be lots of girders going over the top to support these retaining walls. It's a feature which I tried on the first Great Deltan, and it turned out quite well, and I really liked it, so I'll be doing that on this as well. And then they will finish going into the back seam, which will come across here, and then we're into the scenic break again. So it's quite a simple layout. There's not many massive features other than the station and the motorway really to be getting on with, but it's enough so that I'll be satisfied and have a fairly decent layout. I'm expecting to run full length freight trains, my Pendolinos, my HSTs at high speeds on this layout without any issues, and that's what I'm going for really. In terms of overhead electrification, I will be putting up the gantries and all the masts, obviously as replicating the West Coast Main Line, and I'll have my Pendolinos. However, I'm undecided at the minute about the wires. It did take a long time to do the small section of track which I did on the first layout, however it did look quite good. So we'll see in the future. It's just a feature which is very delicate and very time consuming. So there is your basic tour of the baseboard and what I have planned for this layout. That's all from me today. I'll be back within 2 or 3 weeks to start the track laying video, which I plan to film all the way through. And then hopefully we've got a good sort of progression onto this layout. Before I go, I'll just make a couple of shout-outs to a couple of channels which I've recently come across. The first one is Roof Railways. That is run by a guy that I work at the same heritage railway with, and that's how we came across each other. He's got a few good videos, and he's building an N gauge and a double O gauge layout. He's got some good reviews, how-tos. So I'll leave a link in his channel and you can check that one out. And then the second is Stafford N gauge station. I think that's, yeah, Stafford Station N, which is a channel which is quite new to YouTube, I think, or the videos are new anyway. And he's building an exact replica of Stafford Station on the West Coast Main Line, which is obviously appeals a lot to me. He hasn't got too far with it yet, but it looks really good as it is, and there's definitely some good running sessions, and there's potential for that layout to be very, very good. So I'll leave a link to that layout as well, and I highly recommend you have a look at some of his running sessions. So that's all from me today. Thank you for watching, and I'll be back soon. Hopefully you stay interested in this channel and what I have to come. So bye bye.